next feather is a feathered flower, and we're going to feather the stem. So we're going to come down, we're going to make some leaves on this as we do it. Come in here with some interesting veins in the leaves. And make a flower when we get down to the bottom. This is sort of a lily, kind of running out of room here, so there we go. Make some leaves on this side as we come back. Now when we get back to this side, we're going to feather that stem all the way down to the flower and all the way back. The reason that I want you to put that in your sampler is because that is so useful. So often you have applique borders with trim on them and flowers and berries, and it's so interesting if you'll go back and feather those stems of those flowers. Really is a very pretty way to do some quilting out in those borders, or even in your squares when you have applique flowers. Go in and feather some of those stems. It really looks interesting. The last feather that we're going to do on this one is for the bottom part, is we're going to come out here with our stem. We're going to start with some feathers, and then we're going to put some fern spins out here. Now to do a fern spin, you come out, you go into a curl toward the feather, and then you start putting some of these sharp fern leaves on that, and as you come back into that feather, do you see how they integrated right back into the feather? So we'll come out here for our double stem. We'll come up here and we'll start another fern curl. If you watch carefully, you can see how easy it is. These just spin. They look so cool. You see how I integrated that right back into the feather? And this looks like another good place for a fern spin. You're in control of the machine. Make sure that you pause long enough out there in the point that you make it a point and not round that off. You can see as I come back in, I just follow that stem and come right back into my feather. Now we're ready to do the top. Okay, we have 4 feathers to come out of the top of this bow. So in your mind's eye, sort of keep your spaces divided like that. So halfway we're going to do 2 here and 2 here. So we'll come out from the top of the bow. This first one, we'll just start doing our feather here. And as we come back down, we're going to do a feathered curl. So we're going to go into the curl. I'm going to slow the machine down and do this in slow-mo, so you can see how it happens here. Okay. Now we're really following that stem because we want that to integrate right back into our main feather. This will be another good place for a feathered curl. Now watch this. We can even do a double feathered curl. Right from there, I'm going to come out into another curl. Where would this look great on a quilt? Lots of times you are doing borders that go up into the quilt. They have half triangles or whatever, and you need to actually fill those in. You'll be able to stop off and go right into those areas with your little feathered curls. Come up here. And we're continuing to do these feathered curls. You can see again how they integrate right back into the main feather. This is so fun. When you get comfortable enough to do these freehand on your quilts, you're going to have so much fun. Okay. The next feather is really a fern. It's a forked fern, and you just kind of just think of a fork as you're doing it. It looks very leafy. You see how easily we can fill in any area that we want to there. Just sort of do that little zigzag at the top, and then have it come back and integrate right back into the main stem. There we go. Okay, we're going to come out here on this side, and we're going to do a rose out here. You really want to tuck this under, right at the end of that feather. We're doing that rose. And as we come back here, we're going to do a double feather. We're going to do long, short, long, short. Coming out to the end of this again, long, short, long, short. Now notice that the first time you do that long feather, you don't go all the way back to the stem. The short one does go back to the stem. So long doesn't go back to the stem, the short one does. That double feather is really a beautiful feather. The last feather that we're going to do on our little mini sampler is my favorite feather. It's called Feather on a Feather in a Feather. It's just amazing. So watch. First thing we're going to do is a pretty substantial size feather, because you're going to be putting feathers inside of that. So you really do want to have a pretty good size feather. Come back up. So far it looks just like a normal feather. All right, now first of all, let's come through and we're going to go up the feather and down the feather, putting feathers on the outside. But it can be tricky where the feathers meet, so watch carefully. We're going to come up with our feather like this. Now we're going to follow this feather in and out to start the next feather. Follow it in and out. You see that? Follow in and out. And we're just going to kind of make bonnet feathers at the top of this, because we're changing direction. We're coming down now instead of going up. But the feathers are all headed up toward the top of the feather. So when we get to this point, we have to follow that around a little bit in order to change and set ourselves up to do that feather. Follow that around to set ourselves up to come back and do that feather. Set yourself up, come back, and do that feather. Okay, now that is called the feather on a feather. And you could do that on any of your feathers. If you decide they're too plain, you just put a feather on the feather. Now to complete the feather in the feather, we're going to come on the inside of these feathers like this. I'm only going to put about 4, and then I follow the feather and I start it right at the bottom of the feather, and I'll put about 4 feathers in there, and then I'll follow the stem around. I'm not following it all the way around with feathers. I am just putting a few of the feathers in. Now on the top of this one, we're going to do those little kissing feathers again. So that means I did a feather about part way, then I follow the top of the feather around to set myself up, to come back in and put those little feathers that just touch at the top. Now notice how on this side I have to follow my the actual shape of the feather all the way around, here we go, until I start my feather on the way down. So you have to set yourself up for those feathers. There we go. Come all the way around, set yourself up for that feather. Stop right there. We'll move that over and cut our thread. Now let's look at that feather. Isn't that gorgeous, that feather? It looks like we just have reams of feathers around there. That's gorgeous. What a pretty little mini wall hanging.